What do we know so far about COVID-19 vaccines? I'm Marco Perry. Welcome to the Perry Platform. With what seems to be a global worsening of the COVID-19 pandemic, cases are on the rise pretty much everywhere. There is some silver lining. It's been reported that we can see the very beginnings of a vaccine hit the market by the end of this year. That's amazing, but what do we know so far about what's going on in the vaccine world? I'll tell you. The first thing I want to cover is that there are actually multiple vaccines in production as we speak, and when I say multiple, I mean a lot. Over 100. The one making the rounds right now in the news is Pfizer's vaccine, so let's begin there. Last week they put out it really was an internal statement that became newsworthy. Rightfully so, though. There's a lot of good stuff that was written in it. The main headline was that the vaccine that Pfizer was working on was found to be 90% effective in preventing COVID-19 in its participants, the people who were part of the study. And it wasn't a small sample size either. They enrolled 43,000 people, with 42% of those people having diverse backgrounds, so it wasn't just targeting one cultural or ethnic group. And from that study, they also found that there were no serious safety concerns that were revealed or observed. Now, of course, just based on that, it doesn't mean the vaccine is going to be hitting these shelves next week. There's still further processes to go through to make sure it's approved by the FDA and the government and whatnot, but it is very encouraging to have these findings right now. Over the next month, we can expect Pfizer to continue to collect information about the efficacy and the safety, and once that's all put together and they get the final approval, things can begin to roll out. And that is hoping that it does get that final approval and nothing pops up. They don't see any discrepancies in the data or somebody develops a condition, so fingers crossed with that. This vaccine, though, is special. It needs 2 doses actually to kick in. You take one on the onset immediately and one after. I believe it's a week after. And protection kicks in 28 days after the initial dosage. So if this is the one you end up taking down the road, just know if you get the vaccine on day 1, you are not protected just yet. You will need a second dosage and it'll take 28 days, so basically 1 month from the first shot to you actually developing immunization. Now, let's imagine that things go perfectly, that this drug gets approved by, let's say, late December. Call it January 1st just so we can round a little bit easier. And it takes another month for things to get active. The most vulnerable people, which are the individuals who will be getting the vaccine first, can likely expect to be covered by February. January it comes out, takes you a whole month to actually go through the 2 dosages and to develop that immunity. That's not too bad. It feels like we've been in the pandemic for a long time, but we're kind of seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. But that is given the best case scenario. A lot of experts are saying that probably won't happen. There will be some delays with logistics or manufacturing or something that'll push it back. They're saying it's likely that maybe by mid-2021, we'll see a full-scale rollout, and by the end of the year, the average person is beginning to get their doses of the vaccine. There is one critical element here that could halt the deployment of the vaccine in certain places. So these vials of vaccine, have to be stored at extremely cool temperatures or it's going to spoil. Now you can imagine in places where infrastructure and refrigeration are perhaps not very common, that'll be hard to do. I'm not worried about North America or Europe or some other places that we would consider to be developed, but in other countries that are poorer, who don't have these standards in place, that could be a challenge. I will talk about that a little bit later. So Pfizer is saying that they expect to crank out 50 million doses in 2020. So keep in mind too, we're almost done 2020. We're in November. So in a month and a half, they're going to have 50 million sitting in their inventory waiting for approval. It doesn't mean that 50 million is going to hit these stores, but they'll have it in the warehouse for when things are given the go-ahead. Then they're saying by 2021 year end, they expect to crank out another 1.3 billion doses of the vaccine. One critical consideration here is that the 50 million doesn't mean that 50 million people are going to be vaccinated, and the same goes for the 1.3 billion. We said that the vaccine actually takes 2 doses per person to be effective, so 50 million divided by 2, 25 million people are covered with that first batch. And whatever half of 1.3 billion is, let's say it's 650 million people. So that's who we're dealing with in 1 year of Pfizer's production. 650 million-ish people. That's pretty good. And now you might be thinking, oh wait, there's a lot more people in the world. Well, of course, but we also said that there are other drug manufacturers who are also creating vaccines. So hopefully what we'll see here is multiple companies all putting their product out in the market, and therefore we're amplifying our supply. We're getting 600 from Pfizer, maybe 400 from another company, 300 here, and altogether we'll have billions, and that's the goal. Keep in mind too, the scientific community has done wonders here. To be able to crank out a vaccine this quickly while still following proper health and safety guidelines and going through all the testing, the trials with the 40,000 people, it's astounding. They've done a spectacular job, and it's just a testament to how developed we are getting, how advanced our practices and procedures have become. Going forward, things might even become faster. Now that we have this impetus, we have this example. Prior, it would probably take something like years to get it done, but now that we've seen that we can crank out a vaccine extremely quickly when we want to, in less than 1 year, I am excited to see where that type of movement can take us in the future. Now, to get more technical, when looking at this vaccine from Pfizer, it's a different kind of breed, not the traditional type. This is an mRNA-based vaccine. That's different than the conventional vaccine approach. The main idea behind vaccines in general is to introduce a benign virus piece of matter into the body so the immune system can develop a resistance. So your body has these antibodies that protect you. If the antibody doesn't recognize a threat because it's new, it won't know what to do. It won't know how to handle it. It won't know how to kill it. So therefore you're vulnerable. And that's what we're seeing right now. COVID-19 is a new virus. It's a new strand of disease that can inflict massive harm upon people. Our bodies are not evolved to know how to handle it, and therefore we're seeing many people dying. Now, if we left things up to nature, over the course of multiple generations, our body would gradually develop a resistance because we'd get used to it. Your great-grandfather came into contact with COVID-19, and now your grandfather had some type of antibody to it, and it gets passed on to your father and then to you, and that's generally how things work. The vaccine seeks to expedite that process. Instead of your body going to full-scale war with COVID-19 and either dying or becoming severely harmed but getting knowledge in the process, we're going to give you a target dummy, a benign piece of the virus matter, which is the vaccine. Something that you will definitely be able to conquer. The virus will be made to become dormant. It'll enter your body, and you'll have time to analyze it internally. Your antibodies will play with it, essentially, and they'll figure out how to handle it. So, when the actual virus comes into contact with you now, because your body is familiar with it, you'll take care of it. Your antibodies will be trained, and that's essentially, in a nutshell, what's going on here. Now, the virus matter that gets put into the vaccines are rigorously tested to confirm that they are in fact dormant. In other words, they won't infect you. They will not kill you. This is achieved usually through a heat process or by adding chemicals to it to make it benign. They're not injecting you with full-on COVID-19 infestation cells that will take you out. They've been made dormant. They've been put to a level where your body will easily take care of it, and you'll get all the benefits of learning along the way. Now, here's the RNA part. It's kind of what Pfizer did differently. In all living things, there is DNA, which holds all of this genetic data. I saw a great example, I believe in a Harvard article, that talked about DNA like a cookbook. RNA is something like a messenger that takes the relevant data and relays it to where it has to go. So you have all these chefs in your body, call it the antibodies, whatever, who produce things. They need to know what to do. The DNA is the cookbook, but your antibodies can't read it. They need something to tell it what to do, and that's what the RNA does. It's a messenger. It takes the genetic information and it says, hey, here's the recipe for what you have to produce. Just follow these steps and you'll be good. Then the body does what it does at that point. Now, here's the difference. Traditional vaccines, as we said, directly inject virus matter into your body, albeit a benign type. This RNA method doesn't rely on that. Instead, they use RNA in a creative way. Scientists figured out what essentially the genetic code is that instructs the body to produce the antigen. The injected RNA is the messenger that brings that news to the right places in your body. What I'm saying is, instead of having the virus matter in the vaccine itself, we are letting the body manufacture the things that it needs to get things done. The RNA sequence will tell it to produce the benign COVID-19 matter, and from there, the antibodies will take care of it. We then develop resistance in the same way as with the traditional approach. So, what's the difference? What are the benefits here? Scientists say that the RNA approach includes things like a higher success rate. Maybe because when your body makes the COVID contagion by itself, based on its own terms, it's more natural. It's able to adapt things to the way your body individually works, perhaps. I'm not too sure, but that's what I'm getting from it. Now, the second thing is that it's safer because it does not disrupt the body's natural DNA sequence. So it comes down to this. Instead of adding the virus matter into your body with the injection, we're using the RNA to tell our body to do the things that we want. It's essentially the difference between integrating and disrupting. So going back to the cookbook example, it's kind of like this. If we inject ourselves with the traditional method, it's kind of like adding a new ingredient to the cookbook. But with the RNA vaccines, we're adding a temporary page, a new page saying, here, here's the ingredients and the recipe for making the benign COVID-19 antigen. And we create that from our own cookbook, and then we let the body deal with it like that. We haven't added in a variable ingredient that could perhaps get mixed up here and there in different recipes. In fact, we've created a new page, a particular recipe that's only used for this one purpose, and after that, you won't really need it anymore. So that's the difference. You could say it's subtle, but it has relevant consequences, and it's just this new type of way we're approaching vaccines that does seem to be better. But I will assure you though, even though we're saying it's safer, it's more effective, traditional vaccines have all the science behind them also saying that they're safe. It's a safer alternative, but the original method is still damn good, especially when compared to the things that it's protected you against, like polio, measles, smallpox, whatever. There's no room here to be downplaying what the traditional method did. This is just a separate way of going about creating a vaccine. As I also mentioned before, other vaccines are currently being developed concurrently. It isn't just Pfizer. There are private partners and federal agencies around the world making their own prototypes. Here is some info from the CDC. In America, 4 vaccines are in phase 3 development, which is large clinical trials, the same thing as Pfizer. Out of these 4, only the Pfizer vaccine needs 2 shots, the other ones need 1. Internationally also, in other news, Russia has reported that their vaccine is 92% effective, and I'm not too sure if you were willing to dabble in the Russian scientific process to take that vaccine out of there, but if you are, that's what they're saying. I'm not going to say it's a confirmed statement, but it is the claim. So that's the vaccine lay of the land. Things are looking good right now. We're in a good spot. We're making progress. There are multiple alternatives being made concurrently. And by year end, we could see some of these things start deploying. Amazing. Is that the end of COVID? No, it's not. There's a long way to go, but it's a light at the end of the tunnel. It's a glimmer of hope. We're getting there. A little bit more patience will go a long way. Cases are going up right now. Maybe because we're getting tired of distancing, we're getting tired of following the rules, but hang in there. We're getting close. There's no reason to be ramping up the death rate when we could only be months away from seeing a real vaccine in the world. So let's just keep our heads on our shoulders and be logical moving forward. Now let's move on to something else. The challenges of these vaccines. 2 really come to my mind right away. The first is getting it into the hands of poorer countries that are not as well equipped. The first major issue here is climate. Many of these places have hot climates, and as we said, the COVID vaccine cannot be warmed up. It has to be kept at extremely low temperatures. I believe last I saw, it was negative 90 degrees. I could be off there, but it's something like that. It's extremely cold, and if you are not able to maintain that, they're going to spoil. They'll be useless. You would have paid for nothing. So, how do we approach this? Think about it. From a supply chain standpoint, it's very complicated. You have your factory pumping out the vaccine wherever it is. Maybe in America, perhaps, something like that. Okay, so let's assume it's in America. Whatever country you want, you can choose. I'm not entirely sure about the exact location, but it's in a refrigerated cell once it's created in America. Then you have to find a way to get it onto a plane. So whatever that is, a truck driving it to the airport. It always has to be refrigerated. There's no point where it cannot be. Then you load it onto the plane. Okay, maybe that's easy enough in America. But now the plane is flying and it lands to where it has to be. Let's say we're trying to get the vaccine into Africa. Once that plane lands, the vaccines have to be put, once again, into a heavily refrigerated truck. Are there a lot of those in Africa? Maybe. Maybe not. Here the issues are getting a little bit more complicated. From that truck, it has to go somewhere. To the pharmacy, to the hospital, wherever that may be. Along the way, there is no point where the AC can fail. Then once it gets to where it has to go, it has to be kept in these same conditions, and it's a long chain. And any issue along that chain will be a disaster. It costs money to make sure you have the right technology. It costs money to make sure you have the right equipment. It costs money to make sure you have the right people in the right places to make sure the supply chain is not damaged or disrupted at any point. It's easy for us to imagine hospitals and think highest technology, refrigeration, no problem. But that is not the case all around the world, and it's an issue that has to be figured out. Many logistic companies are telling us this. They're saying, hey, we have to figure this out before we start launching things, or otherwise we'll just be left with a pool of waste, a bunch of vials that are no longer usable because we did not follow the proper temperature guidelines. And you can imagine too, perhaps you don't realize that the vials have spoiled and you're administering the vaccine thinking it's all good because you wouldn't be able to tell from looking at it or something like that. The vaccine could spoil, the contagion inside could have died completely and became useless, and you're still administering it, thinking your population is being protected, thinking your money has gone to an actual working vaccine when in reality, it's garbage now. That is a consideration that we have to think about, and it does affect everyone because the simple reality is that we don't get back to normal until the whole world is back to normal. And that includes getting a vaccine to everyone's hands, even the least well-off places. Now, why am I saying that? Well, first of all, if you include something like travel into your vision of normal, that's not going to happen until the globe is intact again. There are going to be individuals in Canada who do not get vaccinated, for whatever reason that is. They're going to be susceptible. They might want to travel, they might want to have travelers come into Canada to boost our economy. Either way, it's impossible given that circumstance because we're going to be bringing back COVID, either into Canada or exporting it somewhere else, revamping the entire pandemic. We have to neutralize the threat first, and to do that, everyone, every country, has to have a relative level of protection. In the worst case, it's very possible that we open up these countries again because we've become vaccinated, and we end up bringing the virus to a place that has not yet caught up, and we kickstart a mini pandemic in that country because all these spreaders are coming in now and infecting people. That would be a disaster, and the opposite could happen too. So what's the answer here? It really is a resource problem. Making sure the right capital investment has been made to ensure these countries are following the right processes and there are no holes in the plan. Now, there are many countries in the world who are helping with that. Countries who are subsidizing the vaccine cost, who are making sure that procedures are in place, who are donating money directly to various countries, and that's all good. It's amazing that we've thought about that, and it is a testament to the world not being so bleak as we may have thought. Of course, every country is suffering due to the pandemic, but still we're thinking about our global neighbors. Countries like Australia, I believe, have put up $500 million to the cause, and various other ones have too put up large donations like that. You could have put that money directly into your own population to up your bid, to make sure Pfizer prioritizes you, but we're finding a balance here, and that's very encouraging. Now, the final challenge that I see with the vaccine, of course, relates to anti-vaxxers and the movement. It's been extremely damaging, and at the beginning, it was easy to laugh at them, call them cuckoos, but they've done some real harm to the collective psyche of our nation. They were chirping a lot about the downsides of vaccines, saying vaccines cause autism, which is false, saying vaccines do this and this and that. It's a conspiracy. the government's going to inject microbes into your body to control you. It's all craziness. But still, it has seeped into our mind subconsciously. And before we move on, I'll debunk these things here. Vaccines cause autism, no. Look it up. There are many reports there is no link between the two. The government is trying to control you. They're going to inject whatever into your body. Okay, let's assume that they are trying to do that. Why would they use vaccines as the vehicle to inject you with a microchip? Or whatever it is they're trying to poison you. There are many other ways they can go about doing that would be less conspicuous. If they're trying to poison you, why not take over the water system? Far easier, less complaints, no one's going to notice that until it's too late. If they want to inject you with something, when you go to an agency to whatever, get a passport, get a document signed, and they take your fingerprint or they take your picture, how easy would it be for them to have a needle there that shoots something into your finger that you don't even notice? Because that's how small things can be these days. They're simply not thinking. They're using these weird connections and fallacies to create the claim that it's something to be avoided, when all of the evidence says the opposite. They are not to be avoided. In fact, they're to be regarded in an almost holy light. The amount of lives that have been saved because of vaccines is unimaginable. The thousands upon thousands of people who have been able to live due to the safety that these provide. And here, maybe it's a symptom of the modern world. We are throwing it under the bus as if it's a curse. And here's the issue with conspiracy. You can laugh at it, you can say whatever you want, but it is finding ways to undermine us. So, how many people are very actively going to line up to be getting this vaccine right away when it drops? Not as much as once before, I would believe. Why is that? Because we're all playing these psychological games now. Hey, what if the anti-vaxxers had a point? Wouldn't it be better for me just to wait a little bit? Let my neighbors and guinea pigs go out there, get the vaccine, and I'll stay home for an extra month or two. See what happens with them. If they develop some type of hysteria or we see issues with it, I'll be safe because I didn't get the vaccine. Because the very notion of the vaccine being dangerous has entered our subconscious. And even though it came from a radical, insane group, it still has a semblance of validity that's affecting our actions going forward. Everyone is probably thinking something like that. Hey, the vaccine was created in record time. What if something happened with the testing and the procedures were out of place and there might be an issue? I'm better off not even getting it for a little bit. Let all my colleagues go forward and get the vaccine first. And here's the issue with this prisoner dilemma-esque type thinking. If everyone subscribes to that logic, we are not going to see any benefits of the vaccine. You need a certain percent of your population to be vaccinated to get benefits like herd immunity. If we're all thinking like this because of the anti-vaxxer mindset that is somewhat ingrained into the population now, people are going to continue to get infected because not enough people have been vaccinated. Once you become vaccinated, you're kind of like a shield. You can get the COVID-19 virus, but it dies within you. You will not be spreading it anymore because you're immune. You don't get these symptoms, you don't get anything. It doesn't hurt you. But if you are still vulnerable because you are not vaccinated, you're going to be a spreader still. And essentially, we're still in the same spot that we were before. Now, the question fundamentally comes down to, is the doubt justified? Do you have a reason for not getting it right away if you can avoid doing so? And I don't think the evidence is there to make that claim something that is even reasonably logical. There is no data that shows us the vaccine is harmful. The trials have been going on with 40,000 people, and there's been nothing wrong identified with the Pfizer trial. And there are many more companies doing the same thing. Of course, the virus vaccine has been made very fast, but it's not like we've thrown caution to the wind, that all standards have gone away, that we're doing this simply just to get the vaccine out there and we don't care about the consequences. I don't believe that. And here's something to think about too. So there are individuals who say, well, COVID is not that dangerous relatively compared to other viruses. You know, the death rate is what, 1-2% for young people? Maybe I can get away with not getting vaccinated. If it was something like Ebola, where the death rate is what, like 30%? Well, the math would be very different then. We'd be less willing to buy into the anti-vaxxer mentality, and we'd get that thing right away. A 1 in 3 chance of dying, no, I'm not playing with that. I'll take the vaccine. So, here's something that we're not considering though. COVID-19, we know very little about it. There are many reports coming out about underlying damage that's caused by the virus so you don't die by it as a young person. But there are many individuals coming back many months after and saying, hey, something is wrong here. My lungs don't feel normal. I'm encountering fatigue. I have a shortness of breath. There seems to be some residual damage here. These are the things that we're playing with. A virus that we don't fully understand. To not vaccinate yourself from that, given the opportunity, leaves you vulnerable to whatever that question mark entails. You don't know what's going to happen to you. Has it damaged your lungs so badly that you'll never be able to run a marathon again? Or even worse, maybe you're going to have a lung failure in 20 years or something like that. There are question marks either way you want to slice it. It seems to me logically you're still better off getting the vaccine though, because we're actually watching that thing for these secondary effects. But COVID, we're very caught up in the death rate. If you don't die from it, you're good to go. We don't have the capacity to watch these secondary effects right now, but they are there, as we're seeing from many reports. And further, if you are a diehard anti-vaxxer, which means essentially that you're open to getting COVID because you don't care about being protected. You're going to go out into the world, live your life, do your thing, and if you get it, you get it. Well, that's kind of what the vaccine is actually. You getting COVID to develop a resistance. Why not opt for the weaker version, which is the vaccine, so your body has an easier time of developing these antibodies? A weaker version that may not have the underlying consequences of the full-on COVID-19 virus strain. I'm at a loss for words for this thinking, and it's going to sabotage us. Instead of saying, hey, we have a plan here to get everyone the vaccine by the end of the year, 2021. We'll roll it out by the end of this year, and hopefully 2022 is the start of post-COVID living. I think that's going to get pushed back. Because of thinking like this, no one's going to be eager to get that vaccine. They're going to be trying to outsmart each other. The prisoner's dilemma. And because of these low adoption rates, we're going to see the timeline pushed out into the future. We may end up losing another year. 2022 is a write-off too. It goes into 2023, maybe longer. It kind of depends on us at this point, and I hear you. If there is a valid reason for doubting the efficacy of the vaccine, then for sure, of course, we should not take it. But the science is not spelling that out. At this point, it's pure conspiracy. We should all be open to logic and being skeptical, and all of that is great. But here, there just is no reason for it. I have not seen the evidence. If someone can come on and explain to me, articulate a good viewpoint as to why we should be doubting all of these vaccines and not using them, I'm open to hearing that. But I have delved into the arguments of the anti-vaxxer group, and I have not seen that. I have not seen an iota of intelligent argument coming from that entity. It is something akin to the illogic of the anti-mask movement. This is not a repression of your freedom. It's simply a smart thing to do during a pandemic, putting a mask on. The fact that you're rebelling so hard is forcing the government to be harder with you because we need it. If you simply complied when they were suggesting it, perhaps it wouldn't be at the point where you're getting fined for not wearing it. It's a back and forth game of madness here, and we're doing it to our own detriment. I'm not too sure things are put into proper perspective here. Wearing a mask, cutting down spread, that's a good thing. Not wearing the mask and fighting for your notion of freedom, increasing spread, that's a bad thing. Okay? If the government is asking you to do something mandatory that actually is an infringement of your freedom, something that I've talked about many times, like upholding freedom of speech, not forcing individuals to use whatever pronouns someone wants and stuff like that, I hear that argument. There is logic to it. With the anti-mask movement, though, there is no logic to that. Things are not put into perspective. We're just arguing for the sake of arguing here. The anti-vaxxers are doing something very similar in a logical movement that's founded in a belief of freedom, a belief of conspiracy, a belief of whatever. And sometimes it's a mistaken belief, and that has to be exposed. If we don't begin to seriously look at how conspiracy can destabilize a community or a country, we're going to be left vulnerable. It's very easy to default to, hey, the anti-vaxxers are a small group of nuts who will never be able to do anything, but we already see what they've done. They've ingrained those seeds of doubt into your mind, and it's going to affect our actions. I already see it happening. People I talk to are saying this. They're not anti-vaxxers, but they're doubting the vaccine approach now. Why? Because of the rhetoric that came out of that group. This is true for virtually all conspiracy groups. People are saying a lot of crazy things today, and because we're lacking and the respect for argument, free speech, and public discourse, we're not sorting these things out. It's a disaster. Everyone's living in their own world right now. Is there a shared reality that we hold as countrymen? Can we agree on what the truth is? Do we have an accurate reading of what the world really is like? I don't think so. I think we're all trapped in the subjectivist realm right now, and it's a disaster. And we may see the fallout during this COVID-19 vaccine rollout. It would be the most comical thing to have the answer to our problem available to us, but to have it disregarded because of random conspiracy thinking. To be able to have effectively killed off the pandemic by the end of 21, but to not do that and push it an extra year because we're trying to outsmart our neighbors and trying to use them as guinea pigs because we fear the anti-vaxxers had a good point when they never did at any point. It's all been nonsense. So think about that. And I'm open to the conversation. As I said, if there's an anti-vaxxer out there who is willing to have a serious talk about their beliefs, well, we can have that. Let me know. But I think that's it for today's conversation. Thanks for joining me. And if you enjoyed the content, be sure to leave a review and share to help us grow. And you can find me online at perryplatform.org and on social media at perryplatform. I'll see you soon.